Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the idea of slow by design, which is this disclaimer is a work in progress. It's really I'm going to be presenting some of the work that is motivating this, but it is really initial ideas as something that I'm working on to write a grant proposal. A little bit about me. As Julie said, I did my master's and my PhD at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. My work focuses on the use of AI for creativity. That means, for any kind of creative purposes, and especially when used in artistic practices. I'm an associate professor here since 2024, September 2024, and before I was a lecturer at Monash University in Australia. My research interests are in computational creativity. I've been working on the field for a little bit more than 10 years, in which the idea is to understand how to enable computers to be created by themselves or to show some kind of creativity. That's the idea of the field. But I kind of go more towards the HCI component of it and how actually computers can be used by creatives. So more about human AI co-creation and using AI as a tool. Also, I'm interested in the philosophical, ethical, and social aspects of creative AI systems and how they impact, the work of creative practitioners and creativity in general. And more recently, I'm very interested in novel interfaces on how to interact, with AI systems, interfaces that are different from the, usual screen-based. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit, as I said before, I'm going to go through some of the work that I have done in these years that has led to what I have done now. And especially I will talk about the Memetic Mixer, which is a device that I have built with some other researchers in Australia and that are kind of underpinning the ideas of a slow technology in my work. So the narrative around AI for creativity is been focusing a lot on the idea that we can create art instantly, basically. So a lot of the tools, especially of the big tech companies, frame it as you can create in minutes, just in a few clicks, create every day. No timeline is too tight, and basically instant production. So it's the idea of enforcing production instead of really thinking about the creative process and really kind of being driven by economical factors. But if we inspect, a little closer, how is prompting really an artistic practice? We think about different kind of images that are being generated and their prompts. We can see very intricate prompts, for instance, like the one in the right there, that talk about a lot of different qualities that the generated pictures should have, about the light, about the kind of angle of the camera and the different lenses. There are also mentions of negative prompts, like for instance, not having extra fingers or not having textual descriptions and things like that. And the image is generated by some standards, very high quality. But at the same time, we see very simple prompts like by Wes Anderson, which version of the software to use. This was Midjourney. And then we see, again, by some standards, very high quality pictures that are being generated. So how can which of these two is any of these images art? So with some colleagues, we're having a lot of debates. I have the privilege to work with a lot of artists and computer scientists. And we were kind of questioning about this, about whether some, uses of AI could be artistic, but some other uses no. But our kind of conclusions are that even if some people can use some AI system in the workflow as a medium towards some kind of creations, towards an artistic creation, there are very limitations to think about prompting as an artistic practice. So there are limitations of the linguistic description, which privileges figurative and literal interpretations of prompts and statistical norms. Semantic drift, between the artist's intent, what they have in mind, and what they actually comes out. And also, it's very difficult for artists to actually put in words many of the things that they do because they are driven by feelings, by mood, by the atmosphere and things that are very difficult basically to verbalize. There are also implications of the data set. As we know, these corpus are parasitic to human creativity. They basically are replicating what they have seen, and they cannot really create anything new per se. There are embedded biases as well. So we know that these data sets have mostly, for instance, they are dominant in the sense from Western kind of artworks, Western artists. Those are the dominant representations in the data sets. These data sets also address elements, but no relational depth between them. So when you are thinking about, for instance, in different compositions of artworks, what does it mean to mix colors or, different things? This is not really something that the systems really understand or even trying to address. And focus on what can be seen, but not what is omitted. So there are many different things that are represented in an artwork. And only the systems it looks at the patterns that are there, but not really thinking about, what, like the negative space and other kind of things that artists really put thought into when they are doing their artworks. And prompt writing is a disembodied practice. So there is no interplay between body and materials, which is a really essential part of many artistic practices. The qualities and constraints of a given media are central to artistic process, and a lot of the images that we see that are generated with AI are trying to eliminate a lot of the kind of failures that are seen from them, like for instance, the extra fingers, the textual descriptions that before were really not really textual, and now you can see less and less those kind of things unless you use, a model from the past 5 years. And the idea of an artist project unfolding over time has almost no foothold in current prompt-based practices. So it's very difficult for an artist to really think about using AI for a long period of time to develop a concept. They use it, or at least as far as I know, with the artists that I have seen how they use it for a specific thing, but not really is a kind of very long period project. And I'm talking mostly about the generative AI, kind of language models, because there are other models from the past that artists really use in a different way. So this really led me also to think about, okay, can actually visual artists that with physical practice embed or use AI tools into their creative workflows? So we did this study, with 7 visual artists. They have different practices, and some of them have more than one. But most of them were tattooers, but they were also doing painting, illustrators, and there was also designers. They were very young, 27 to 35 years old. They range from professional to hobbyists. And basically all work primarily with physical materials. What we did was that we asked them for some of samples of their work, and we personalized a version of Stable Diffusion for them. It was only for their use. So basically we fine-tuned Stable Diffusion with some of the samples of their work and gave it to them, that copy of Stable Diffusion for them to use in their practice for 2 weeks, each of them. And then we have some structured interviews with each of them, asking them, about the experience of using the system, the experience with different AI systems that were not personalized for their art, and in general, different kind of questions about what they thought about using AI for this. And we apply diffractive analysis, which is a methodology for analysis of, for different kind of thematic analysis. It's very similar to thematic analysis in the sense that you kind of analyze transcripts of interviews or focus groups. But the idea is to focus specifically on the effects of differences and to really, really, kind of highlight contradiction, divergence, and ambivalence in the data. So we had, when we talked to the participants, there are different things that came up. We have things like, where they were talking about plagiarism, about ethical issues. Of course, that kind of always comes up when you talk with artists about the use of AI. So they were talking about, I have always respected the idea of certain imagery, like going into a person directly, and they felt that this was very impersonal because they were using a lot of work from people that basically they didn't know. They were talking about the materiality. So although some of them said some of the images generated were interesting, they were very difficult to actually, if they wanted to translate them into a tattoo, for instance, or something like that, it would be very difficult to do. It would be almost impossible to recreate. They also talk about how they could use it to actually make more profit. So a lot of them, because they were young, they were talking about how difficult it is to make it on their fields, and that they felt that maybe the use of AI could make them faster and could make their work in that sense easier, and they could even play even the playing field a little bit because they felt in disadvantage with artists that were already kind of established. And they talk about as well about the agency of the system and how they kind of wanted to have control, but as well they needed to give a little bit of leeway because there were some different parameters that they could set up. So they kind of have to leave it a little bit of leeway to really, get those kind of qualities of the AI instead of being just a copy of themselves in some way. And something very interesting they talk about when the prompt itself was quite abstract, then it came up with things that I actually found visually interesting. So we'll talk a little bit more about it later, because this is one of the main things that motivated us for our next work. So the most highlighted difference between that the participants were talking about were about having the AI for production and then AI for ideation. So AI for production, they thought they could use it, when they have already something in mind, and they could they just needed to realize it there, and they could have something done quickly and automate tedious tasks. In that sense, they really needed something that would be kind of faithful to the prompt and very accurate. So precise and literal prompts were required and requires more human control. And it was basically driven by economical factors, basically. And then they distinguish AI for ideation, which is when they said, I will use it more earlier in the process, in the creative process. The idea is to exploit the unpredictability as a feature. So really explore the design space of what the systems could provide. Values divergent and unexpected output. So here they weren't expecting to have a copy of themselves, and many of them thought, yeah, the personalized system was really nice in the sense that we could see something closer to what I need, and maybe that was better for AI for production, but I don't need one more of myself. I need something that gives me different ideas. The abstract poetic prompts work best. So basically they talk a lot about non-literal use. So the idea of they were just putting feelings on things like that in the systems, and that was what they got more inspiration from. So it requires more machine agency, and the output is the catalyst, not the final product. So the idea of having that as an inspiration instead of as the final. So these are some examples, and that was the most striking thing. Some examples of kind of abstract, in some sense, or non-literal prompts, in the sense that they weren't asking for a specific kind of drawing that they wanted to have to be able to replicate or something like that, but they were just saying, for instance, that a tattoo flash sheet with an image of a poem or a sheet of you. So it's very they really left the very ambiguous, basically, the prompts. And these was the ones that they said that inspires them the more. And this was really a theme between all the participants, that really they highlighted a lot about this being a nice use of this kind of AI systems. So this kind of made us think a lot about, okay, how can we enable visual artists or artists in general, creative practitioners, to use AI in a way that is non-literal. That kind of non-literal really stick to us, and we were trying to find a way of doing this. And we got this, we came across this slow technology philosophy. So to give you a little bit of context, the slow technology is inspired by many movements before it. So the first one is a slow food, which was introduced, I think, late 1800s, if I'm not wrong. My memory doesn't fail me, in Italy, because basically kind of going against the idea of fast food. An Italian chef was really, angry about the idea of having these fast food restaurants or type of food there. So started this movement, which really became global. And then the design community kind of took it as well. I don't remember when, but they took it as well, and they started thinking about, how the idea of a slowness of, using local products, thinking about the environment, in the fast food, thinking about fresh food. So how to do that? And then this kind of was taken by, technology, and the slow technology movement also was created. And the idea of the slow technology movement is to, think about technology in a reflective way. So creating technology that is designed for reflection instead of thinking of technology that is designed to solve a problem specifically or for efficiency. So there are three principles of the slow technology philosophy. First is reflective technology, which invites reflection and at the same time is reflective in its expression. So the idea is that we not only consume, but that we actually, if we have something given to us by a system, then we think about what that means. And also what the system does is also reflective in some ways. It's not just generating just for the sake of it, like the systems that just generate, but there is some kind of reflective mode to it. Time technology, so the idea of amplifying the process of time, and this is kind of different dimensions of time. For instance, bringing things from the past and giving it value again in the present, or pausing, kind of different dimensions of time. And amplified environments, which is again amplifying the process of things to make them into something more than merely a silent tool for fast access to something else. So the idea of, like we have our pictures, for instance, then that we take, and we, take a lot of pictures, photos during our lives with our mobile phones, but then they get forgotten. So for instance, giving that kind of value and trying to bring more presence to the things that we do. The problem with the slow technology is that it's very out there. And it's very difficult to really, when you are thinking about implementing something, really, how do you, concretely implement it? Or at least that's what we found. And has been a criticism of slow technology. So to give you an example, there is this, and there was this thought when it was introduced, the slow technology, it was introduced with a thought experiment, the idea of having a doorbell that plays your favorite song, whoever lives in the house, and then it will play just a little bit every time that someone, pushes the doorbell until it basically finishes. So that was the kind of the thought experiment that they presented, the slow technology. And this is an example of an actual artifact that was designed, photo box, which the idea is that it has access to the user's gallery of photos, and it will print a picture of their selection once a month. And you don't know when it will do it, so you kind of go to the device, open and see if there is one, maybe no. So basically you have no control over it, and it will just print one whenever it wants, basically. I don't know. So this is an example of one of those. So based on this, we were thinking, okay, how can we go beyond the chat interface? Thinking about creative ways of interacting with LLMs beyond that kind of screen-based interaction, and using constraints in the interaction as a creative mechanism. That non-literal use, again, was really one of our drivers, and based on the principles of a slow technology. So we thought about magnetic poetry. Have you used magnetic poetry? Yeah. So the idea of having, these tiles that you put in the fridge, and then you can, write sentences with it, or, shopping lists, or I don't know, whatever it is that people use it for, leave messages for your loved ones, things like that. And we thought that could be because we were thinking, how can we use LLMs? We thought this could be a good way to interface with an LLM and giving a constraint, because the magnetic poetry sets, or they have a limited amount of words that you can use. So basically you have to work with those. And there are some that have specific purposes, like there are some for haiku, some are kind of very specific purposes as well. But again, there are constraints about the vocabulary. So what it was good was the limited vocabulary, and we thought, okay, we need limited vocabulary and responses. It had the physical manipulation, which we wanted a kind of different interaction. So physical manipulation of words and controls, and in general purpose. So we created the Memetic Poet, which was this device that basically you use kind of some tiles as well, some tiles that the device would recognize when placing the slate. And we provided these markers, which were basically different ways that could be interacted with the system. And they had a drawer for storing the tiles there. So the different markers, it was very limited. We have only 4 markets: this interpret, collaborate, ideate, and analogy. And the idea here is basically interfacing with a large language model through a prompt chain. So the first prompt would say what the mode is. So in interpret was kind of provide an interpretation about the poem or the input that was being given with the tiles. Collaborate was to work with only those words, try to work with only those words to generate a question and then answer it. Then ideate was to provide an idea based on what the user had put in there. And then analogy was to reframe the user's input in a different field of the choosing of the system. And then the second prompt was about, rephrase it, because we have a very long answer. So it was more about kind of keeping it short. So we set up this in the lab, which had a lot of, around 14 people in the lab, participants, all academics with artistic practices as well, a lot of them. We left it in the lab for 2 weeks. We have a total of 413 different points being output. And there are other statistics, but I didn't put them here. But basically, we log everything, the tiles placed, the markers used, and the LLM's responses. And then we did a 1-hour focus group with the members of the lab, and then a thematic analysis of the focus group transcript. So you can see an example here, for instance, of the input and the mode analogy. It's very, very, restricted. So shine, promise, water, thought, anti-flower, ray soft. The answer, do we water softly? Caresses the budding flower, refreshing the mind's hardened soul. I don't know, something like that. So the answer that we got from people in the lab, and actually we left also in a different lab, and we got but I didn't put that here. We got very similar answers. Is that the system was really fun to work with, or to use, not to work with, to use. It was it kind of provided some kind of relaxation for moments in which they thought, I'm tired, I don't know, want a break, and they would go to the device and use it. So in that sense, it was successful in that use. Participants found the Tanjore interface easy, intuitive, and playful, but they thought the vocabulary was way too limited. And if they wanted to use it for, actually they did wanted to use it for sometimes things that they were thinking about, but they need a vocabulary that was more closer to what they were doing. And this vocabulary was the general one, so it wasn't really helpful. And they wanted more control over the responses. The responses as such, the poetic responses were the most interesting. However, they wanted the ability to tune the device to their needs, so they wanted a lot more kind of control. And they also thought that the tone of the AI was very limited, mostly positive, as we know that the systems can be, and wanted kind of more personality in the responses, basically. So we kind of did another go, and we created we were inspired. We had a lot of musicians one musician in the group, but other musicians, co-workers. And we thought about the magnetic poetic and audio mixing, if you know this kind of systems, yeah. So the idea of having different controls to change the sound that is being generated. And then so we upgraded the Memetic Poet to the Memetic Mixer. So the idea here is that we were trying to allow for more control over the system. And I will play the video, but it's playing a little bit.
So it's a tangible device for the creative exploration of large language models. People communicate with the device using magnetic poetry. The device reads words as they are placed on its surface. When you're finished, the text is sent to the language model and the response displayed on the e-paper screen. The mixer is based on a previous device we developed, the Memetic Poet, which used similar words for communication with the language model. 4 additional round markers were used to indicate the mode of response desired from the language model. But after evaluating the Memetic Poet with a group of artists, we found that while the aesthetics and mode of interaction were interesting, the device didn't give its users enough control of the kind of response they wanted. So, inspired by audio mixing and music synthesizers, we added a series of knobs and sliders to allow people to easily control many aspects of the response, including personality, tone, and age of the responder. The personality mixer determines the overall personality of the language model's responses. Users can mix together different personality aspects, which are based on what is known as the Big 5 personality types. To get started quickly, we provide a preset knob that can instantly switch between 4 presets: Guru, Bestie, Accountant, and Cynic. The knobs can be divided into 4 categories: direct controls, filters, effects, and mode. The temperature knob affects the creativity of responses. Dial it up to get results that often verge on gibberish or inspiration. The filter section takes an internal response given by the language model and filters it according to the respondent's age, from baby to senior citizen. their vocabulary from simple to eloquent, and the overall length of response desired from a single word to a crazy long rant. The effects section changes the style of response generated. Dial up the sarcasm for the ultimate mockery in every response, or set the morality to evil for a touch of the macabre. Not happy with the constant wokeness of responses? Turn the politics knob hard to the right to satisfy the politics of even the most ardent Trump supporter. Is your AI too safe and comfortable? Turn up distress so they really do feel the pain of almost being alive. The Mixer is your next interactive AI companion to help with writing, ideation, or creative inspiration. The Memetic.
So yeah, I don't think I need to explain too much about it because I forgot that I was explaining in the video, but basically we have responding kind of to the giving more control and kind of trying to change the tone of the responses. We provided all these different controls that would allow to have this kind of different tones to basically the responses. The four personalities which were explained. So basically, this was based in the big five model of personality traits that, I don't know if you know that model that talks about like kind of explains human behavior based on five traits, which I think is openness, consciousness. Sorry if I'm not. I don't remember the other ones, but basically we translated it into these five different sliders, which go into different extremes of each of the five traits, explain what we gave as the interpretation of the five traits, and just chose those four different personalities. And this is an example of the prompt chain. Again, we use the prompt chain because when you work with these languages, it's better to have like small tasks instead of just having a whole prompt together. So each of the controls would map to, depending on the position on the knob or the slider, it would map to a number. So for instance, here, if this one, the optimist pessimist is set to 0.8, is basically you're an optimist. Generally you think that things will be positive. So it basically that setting would map to that prompt. And the same with the other ones, and then that would constitute the instruction prompt, which is the first one given to LLM. Compose a new text relating to the text provided in the triple quotes. The text you compose should be prose, do not include any conversational elements or discussion of the provided text. That you have the input text, which is basically the input tiles that the user used, and then all the different controls. We have a response, and that response gets further filtered depending on the age, vocabulary, and length filters. And then we have the output response. So again, we gave this time we wanted to understand really how artists could use it. Like the last time was kind of in a group setting. So this time we wanted to give it to individual artists to see how they could use the system. So we gave it to 4 participants, all creative practitioners. There were 2 writers. One of the writers was also a painter. There was a scientist, a researcher, who was also a musician, and there was a poet who was also a researcher as well. Each of them had it in their home for 2 weeks, and there were a total log 314 interactions. Again, we logged all the tiles plays, the control adjustments, and the LLM responses, and then we conducted a semi-structured interview, a 1-hour semi-structured interview, and did thematic analysis of it. So it's very difficult to put all. These are some example outputs. here. So you can see, for instance, in this output, oh, splendid, let us plunge headfirst into the abyss of despondency conjured by this text, shall we? So there was, in this one particularly, for instance, it had the sarcasm kind of high. So you could see that there are different kind of answers there. These ones, I don't remember what they were. They have teenager and different kind of thing. There were some with babies and say, oh, goo goo gaga, and things like that. So we have some challenges. There was a lot of pushback against the purpose-specific outputs. And we actually, for the tiles, we actually gave them a personalized set of tiles. We asked them for some samples of their work, and we tried to do some kind of analysis of their work using AI as well. Coming up with a set of like around 200 words. This still wasn't good. It wasn't going. It was really a really difficult thing to be honest. And also because not necessarily because that's a sample of their work, is something that they were working at the moment, you know. So that was very difficult to really do. So the set of the input vocabulary was still not really useful enough in that sense. They said that it may be good for noises, but not for experienced individuals, which are, with AI in general, we have seen that that's what a lot of people say when they are using it for the arts. They still desire more control, and there was a pushback against the slow interaction. So one thing that we could see is that because they knew it was AI, they really were still expecting that kind of, I'm giving you something, just give me something concrete, something that I can use. That's what I'm expecting because this is AI. So that was very, very difficult in that sense. But even though they have this kind of resistance, they still kind of adapted it to their own workflows. So the first participant, she was a painter and writer, and she's really against AI. I mean, she says that it's like the worst thing in life that has been created. But she, after some days of using it, because she said, okay, I'm committed to the study, so I'm going to try to use it. Then she found a way, and it's to kind of confirm the kind of mood that she was writing in her novel, because she was also a writer. So she said that she found that when the device responded and kind of confirmed that atmosphere, it helped her in that sense to confirm what she was doing with her novel. The second participant found it, like you said, to give shape again to what he was writing. He was more, he was experimental in the use of AI, and he said that he was experimental always with the use of AI, and he really tried to understand how it worked. But the idea that he said is that it kind of helped giving shape the responses. The physical forms of the materiality of it was something that the third participant said that it was something that he would invest time in the tangible element, instead of the history of ChatGPT, which is digital rubbish, as he put it. So he took some photographs of the things that he liked as well, and he said that is something that he went back basically to it. And the fourth participant, who is a poet, he said that each word, because they were so isolated, it was like an island. Basically, he gave it this kind of a flow in the poetry, and he found that it was really good in that sense, to fill in that. Then his poetry would fill in the gaps. So it was interesting to see how they each gave a different use to the system. And in that sense, we found those connections to the slow technology. So language as material, so participants, basically the tiles, the controls, and the responses were kind of sensory, and forgotten the presence of that interaction. So they did like the physicality of it, and they said that that's something that really, really, like, they would go to it when thinking about their practice. The friction as feature, so even though they found the limited vocabulary and the limited responses and limited control, they actually kind of were able to build from it. And some of them said that it also gave them meditation kind of outlet and temporal depth as well. So we saw different kind of how do you say, shifts that emerge over the sustained week, and also references to kind of time in the sense of how they used it. So that was also good in the sense of slow technology, the values durability and long-term engagement. So we kind of have some design implications, not design considerations. It's kind of a very broad word because it's only for people, so we cannot really say that these are things to follow, but let's say maybe I should have called it insights that we found from there. That is that to enable these kind of interactions, we need to support non-directive modes. So models and interfaces that support open-ended, ambiguous, exploratory interaction, not kind of instruction-oriented tasks as it is now. The LLMs, you really have to give instructions, specific instructions, but they are not good at handling ambiguity or kind of something that is more open-ended. At least that we know. I don't know if you know anything that is new that's like that. Attending to multiple temporalities, so immediacy, flow, transition, and permanence. So the idea is not slow, doesn't mean that it has to be, the speed has to be slow. It's more about having different pace that is contemplative. So attending to that is important. Foreground the materiality of language supporting sensory and affective dimension of language. So there's a lot of research that talks about, how language has different dimensions and forms in some way. So kind of try to work on that. So slowness as a creative practice is kind of, AI is creating a new kind of way to interact with the systems in this era. And slowing down, as I said, is not only about the speed, but about all these kind of different friction, small data sets, local models, sustainability. It's about basically kind of fostering and thinking about more reflective uses of the systems. And I'm not saying that the AI that we have are not good for anything, because they are. I'm just thinking more about the application to creativity. Slowing down requires a cultural shift. So as I said before, there is resistance. If you think about using an AI, you want an answer. And that's what happened, even for the participants that were skeptic about AI, they said, well, if I'm using AI, I want an answer. So it requires cultural shift, a shift to creation from meaning and intention. Thank you. A shift on how we assign value, and a shift towards mindful consumption. And as I said, this style is very limited. It's only for people, and the others I was in the lab. So it's not generalizable, some more work is needed, and that's where I'm very happy to hear any suggestions. I have some questions in general that I'm thinking. How could models be conditioned more subjective dimensions, such as affect rather than semantic content? If so, what would be the training data? What would it mean for a model to have a slow mode, for instance, where responses are deliberately deferred, partial, or return stages? How can we evaluate the usefulness of these models? And how can we train these models as well? Many other questions that I'm sure I need to add. And that's it. Thank you. For comments or suggestions. Yeah.
With the Memetic Mixer, how do you decide which of the, I suppose, the controls or filters were sort of went into the first sort of prompts, and there were the ones like the age and the vocabulary that went into the filter the second?
Yeah.
How did you decide which?
That was a bit from the feedback from the Memetic poet, because if you remember in the mimetic poet, we kind of said reduce it. We kept the answers short because of the space that we had in the slate. So some of the participants were saying that they wanted more, that they wanted to be able to, for the answer, kind of the system to elaborate or not, and so kind of have that kind of control. So in the memetic mixer, so we have the filters are the ones that kind of work in that way. So we have first what is the answer to whatever they wanted to do. And then the filters would kind of take that and do that kind of elaboration, either if it was because they wanted something longer, for instance, or shorter, or they wanted it in a different kind of age, basically. So that was what led us to have that kind of break between them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I was just thinking that, you know, obviously you could control them with the
Yeah.
system prompt is a teenager with an advanced vocabulary or a teenager.
Yeah.
And I realised, well, with logic, sometimes something work, but like that, maybe having that as a second kind of, this is something you really have to control, maybe that works better.
Yeah, yeah, like you.
Kate really comes back and doing the.
Like you mean giving the user the
Yeah,
control of
I
that.
can see that the user wants that control, but that this would work better like this than having it all in the system prompt originally, where you'd say,
Yeah.
must be a single sentence, which you could have done,
Mm-hmm.
but you've done it, let it be as creative and as possible in some of its length, and then you've asked.
And then
I
at
just wondered, you know, both I can see could work, so I was just wondering what.
Yeah.
The decision of breaking it down into those two stages.
Yeah, you're right. It was mostly because of that, because of the feedback that we got from the participants in the first study, and that's what we kind of interpreted. The way we interpreted it, they wanted different tones in the response, personalities. So that was the first part, and then the second part is about elaborating more or less, or having that. That was mostly that. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
There's something I think about a lot is like AI literacy. And I think this is a really brilliant tool to use, or kind of a version of this, with people to show them, because it's really, I think one of the useful things about using generative AI is, critique this like you were a reviewer of this journal, or review this as if you were assessing my insurance claim. So it's taking on those kind of personalities. But that's such quite kind of hard concept to kind of explain to regular people who are kind of being included in the systems, but through no choice of their own. And I think it's really, I've thought about like using, especially that like the optimistic, pessimistic, and those different modes. They're not it's not this, really have like, those four modes of play. It's actually a really kind of fun and accessible way of thinking about like, you can kind of use this system, and especially because it's on a physical system, I just think this is a really kind of fun way to do, it's to do kind of AI literacy for kind of regular folks.
That's really interesting. In these studies that didn't come up because they were using it really for kind of their creative practice. But in other studies with other tools that we have done, in which the idea is to use AI not to just generate, but to use it in a kind of reflective way, that has come up a lot, how these systems could be used for education, of how AI works, or even education of a discipline, for instance, music, how like its initial steps into music as well, for instance. But those are other but yeah, definitely that could be, and it's a fun way it is fun. It is fun to use the system.
I was wondering whether you are planning to put any version of these tools kind of back out into more long-term studies, because I was thinking it was interesting, that you're talking about slow technology, but maybe some of the more interesting findings of people absorbing and adapting their use of these things might happen over a longer period of time.
Yeah, precisely. That's kind of in the grant that I'm writing. part of it is the idea of we need time for this, so is not necessarily using this system, this device, but yeah, some kind of a slow technology that allows for that sustained use to really understand. Because one of the reflections that have gone into a slow technology and all these slow movements is that it requires time for adaptation, for, as I said, that kind of mindset that you have about how to use things. It requires time. So yeah, definitely that's something that I'm hoping, if the proposal is accepted, then yeah, that's something.
Yeah, so you find any of the traits, even all the other ones, I can't remember what they were, morality and sarcasm and things like that, more or less, I suppose, reliable to sort of spot in the output. I mean, and whether times, I mean, obviously that interacts slightly with what's being asked, isn't it? It must be hard, sometimes to be sarcastic with some inputs and others. So I was wondering whether you noticed anything in terms of how the model performed in terms of
How good it was at being sarcastic.
it being always an optimist. If you ask it to always be optimistic, you never get fed up with being optimistic.
Yeah, no, it really, if we said it optimistic, we would really stop to being optimistic. Yeah, definitely. I think some of the most were better than other ones. The participants actually said that the sarcastic one, some of them liked it, some of them hated it. So that's something that we also saw, that participants really, when they found some settings that they liked, they stuck to them. So they weren't so explorative in that sense. They explore at the beginning and then just stay with specific
kind of that personality that they like.
Kind of like, for instance, for the first participant, that she really found the mood and the atmosphere, she really stuck to that kind of to the presets that work for her and the control that work for her. So I think it worked in following the instructions. Yeah, it did. How good it is, yeah, that's different. That's a different question. I guess that's, yeah. For some it was good, for some it was not. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just a quick, so the 4 participants that you had were all artists.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how much do you think your conclusions are dependent on that? So if we got a digital native in, would they just be so annoyed by the fact that they can't type in?
Yeah, possibly. No, definitely. As I said, it's very limited. And the conclusions, as I said, that design implications, it wasn't the best. I think it was more insights that we got from these 4 people. It was very dependent. As you can see, they each gave a different use. It's very, very localized to what they were doing. And I think, but that's one of the things that I want to focus the work on, is technology that you don't have a specific use, but you give it, your own interpretation and your own use in some way. So I really like that, actually. But that's why I said those principles, let's say, I don't think they can be generalized. So it's really dependent on that. And yeah, people, for instance, that's why we didn't try with digital artists. Because then, I mean, I think it would be a lot more difficult for people. Not saying that it cannot be possible, because there are devices that artists and different people use in their work. I don't know if you know, for instance, oblique strategies. Yeah, so these cards that give you an instruction, like a 1-sentence instruction, like go for a walk, something like that, and creative practitioners use them for getting out of, the being stuck in their work. And it was created by Brian Eno. So it was using music, and it would say something like, choose a different instrument, or really unrelated, like go for a walk, or things like that, and they use it. So still, I believe that this could have a place in the practice of digital artists, but I don't know what that would be. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was just reflecting on the fact that a lot of the limited word set, I think too limited or whatever, seems to be the issue, right? Or an issue.
an
It
issue.
felt like that was, in a sense, the easiest thing to generalize, where you could have typed input or written input or something, yeah, but you could have, the input device seems to be one of the easier things you could put into it,
Mm.
in a sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, something that we thought is, the problem is constraints are good for creative practice, and the idea is to constrain it. But we thought we could let them just place something in display. Actually, that was something that some participants did. They placed this sushi fish thingy that
Okay.
had the soy sauce in. They put it to see if the system would recognize it, which was interesting. But it will recognize it, obviously. But something like that, for instance, participants, like, it would be nice to just place figures, for instance, images, or things like that, and then see what the device can do with it. So there are many possibilities to do with the input, but still, if you just, like, if you can write something like a prompt and just put it there, then it's not really as constrained as what we are looking for. No, we're really trying a different type of interaction. Thanks.
Okay, let's thank our speaker again.